back to the Reagan RedZone. I'm your host, Webb Milward. Joining me today from our team are Kevin Stipe and Tom Doran. Gentlemen, welcome back to the RedZone. Good to see you.
Hey, Webb, good to see you.
You know, here at the RedZone, we took a little bit of a break in August to catch our breath, a little vacation time. But with football season back this fall, it's only fitting that the RedZone is back as well. And thrilled to have you guys joining us. You know, we've got a saying around here at Reagan that it's hard to manage what you don't measure at your firm. And we have long been a metrics-based organization. We certainly value those metrics and that data. We love to review how firms are performing against their peers. How do they stack up against some of the best in the industry? And really the origin of those metrics and that type of thinking really starts in 1993 with our development of the best practices study. And if those on the call here aren't familiar, we launched the best practices study in 1993 in collaboration with the Big I. This year, 2025, is our 32nd year the best practices study. And this year, the study was released in August. We had over 1,100 firms participate, and 350 were awarded the best practices designation. Those firms will join together in January of 2026 in Austin, Texas for the Best Practices Symposium. So again, continues to be a very valuable and very important thing for firms. I think a lot of firms, guys, use this as kind of a report card, kind of an annual check of how are they performing, what are their opportunities for growth, for perpetuation, what are the key value drivers that they're looking at as they think about continuing to position their agency to win. So it's an exciting time here for us with that launched, and thought we'd start. You guys have both been with Reagan since that time. Kevin, throw it to you first. Why did we kind of start or launch the best practices? What was going on in the industry at that time that really necessitated something like this coming online?
Well, yeah, it was interesting, but people wouldn't necessarily know this if they hadn't been around at that time. But in 1993, the early 90s, really, there was a real concern across the industry that agency values were falling. And it was a soft market, and there was this traditional benchmark valuation for an agency that agencies were worth 1.5 times. They would sell their business for 1.5 times. And that number was falling. And there were actually several consulting firms that were asked to write white papers by the Big I. They set up a commission to enhance agency value. And these white papers really addressed the question of, are agency values falling? If so, how much? What are the prospects for them to rebound? And it was really out of that the best practices study was launched as a way to try to improve agency performance and ultimately to impact values, to reset values at or above that 1.5 time benchmark. And, you know, it's funny looking back now, here we are in an era where we're setting records for agency valuations. I'm tempted to say that this is like the most successful initiative in the history of our company. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other factors that have played into that, but I really do think that the best practices benchmarks have really helped agencies across our entire industry improve their performance, and that has led to higher value.
Nice. And Tom, really interestingly for you personally, you were hired at that time really to develop the best practices study, and it sounds like it almost didn't get off the ground. So what are your thoughts from back then?
Yeah, this is 1993, and so in a previous life, I was a computer nerd. The Reagan guys, who, you know, I've known Bobby for 40 years. I've known Kevin for 37 years. So we were all friends long before we worked together. They brought me over to start up the best practices study, and I wrote the software that we used to generate the first study. And I'll never forget the first month that I was at Reagan. We used to do a large agent roundtable where we'd get 10 or 15 of the largest brokers in the country together in a roundtable setting to kind of process what's going on. And so that was my first business trip with Reagan. And it's in Chicago. And we go up to Chicago and we have the 2 days of meetings and the rubber chicken dinner and, all that stuff. So back in those days, Bobby was a real steward of our clients' money and was I don't want to say cheap, but it fits. We would travel. We would have to stay in the same room. So Kevin and I are sharing a room, and it's about 9 or 9:30. And at the time I'm 33 years old. I'm running nonstop. I can't get enough food. So I pick up the phone and order a $8 omelet. Okay. And woof that thing down, go to bed. We're in the car the next day heading to the airport, and Bobby's, constantly wanting to process information. What worked, what didn't work, what did you like? And Kevin's like, yeah, I don't think Tom liked the food, Bobby. He felt the need at 9 or 9:30 to order an additional omelet. Now we'd probably spent $22 on my meal. So, gosh, another $8 is and Bobby was just livid. I mean, you could just see the veins pulsing in his head. Kevin's in the back seat kind of laughing. And I'm like, what have I gotten myself? Who are these people? I can't work like this. And I learned two very good lessons that day. First, that Bobby is very cost conscious, to his credit. Second, that Kevin is a weasel and will never miss any opportunity to throw even a good friend under the bus. But I hung in there through that little debacle, and here we are 33 years later, getting to be a career.
I love it. Both of you in your comments mentioned valuations, and obviously there's been a pretty significant change in valuations over those 32 years. Let's think about where we are today. Why are those valuations so much higher? What are some of the contributing factors? And you can touch on kind of the evolution or also just where we find ourselves in today's market.
Kevin, why don't you start out with the valuation landscape, and then maybe I'll touch on the whys behind it.
Great. But I'll say a couple funny anecdotal things that you guys might not remember about the study itself. The first year we did the study in 1993, there were 5 revenue categories, and the category for the largest firms in the study was over $5 million in revenue. And that sounds like ridiculously small in terms of the whole industry. Well, if you look back to the Business Insurance Top 100 list from 1993, 7.9 million actually got you on the top 100 list. So our threshold of 5 million was just off the top 100 list. We've since increased it 3 times, and this last year we raised it for the third time up to over 100 million. So now our biggest category is over 100 million in revenue. The biggest thing that's happened in terms of valuations is that we started from a low point, whether you look at multiple of revenue or multiple of EBITDA, and then those multiples have increased dramatically based on investor interest in our sector. But it's also been the performance of the agencies, based in part upon the reliance on benchmarks and all kinds of other things that they've done. And maybe, Tom, why don't you comment on just how they've improved their performance? Because I think that's such an important part of this.
Yeah, and I think Kevin touched on this. Agencies using these benchmarks are super helpful. Back in 1993, if you asked Kevin, what's a good revenue per employee number, or what's a good new business number, Kevin would have made up an answer, and he would have done so with great confidence, but there would have been no value to it whatsoever.
He's not always right, but he's never in doubt.
He never lacks confidence. The best practices study, Richard, kind of grown to be the industry's primary benchmarking study, for the first time allowed us to answer questions around what are high performing brokers doing. And in doing so, allowed agencies to, during their planning sessions, for example, talk about where they are today, what is the potential, what is the best practices potential, and then the strategy of how we're going to get there. So, we'll focus on a couple benchmarks that are kind of eye-popping, that are kind of behind the valuation run-up. I think the first and most obvious metric that has changed dramatically is just simply the profitability. We look at the profitability. Let's take our $2.5 to $5 million firms, which is a category we had in '93. We've still got it today, so it makes for a good comparison. The average agency was generating a pro forma, or after adjustments are made, pro forma profit of 12%. Today, in the best practices study that we just published, profitability in that category is just over 29%. So you've seen about a 2.4x increase in profitability. And as you know, valuation is a function of profitability and growth. 2.4x profitability, you're going to materially increase the value of the agency.
Yes.
Another cool metric.
Especially,
Go ahead, Kevin.
Especially when the EBITDA multiples in the marketplace have essentially doubled since that time. And so you get a doubling of the agency performance and a doubling of the valuation multiple, and suddenly you're at a 4x multiple of value.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Another metric that people love because it is kind of our favorite benchmark because you can't hide from it. It's just revenue per employee. But to get to that, you just take the agency's total revenue divided by the number of people. Provides great insight into the productivity or the efficiency of an agency, which is behind a lot of the valuation increase. The average firm of that size, $2.5 to $5 million, generated $81,000 of revenue per employee in 1993. Today, that number also 2.4x is 193,000. So the average agency can do roughly two and a half times as much work today with the same number of people that they could have done 30 years ago. The final, Kevin mentioned multiples have gone up. Profitability is up. Competition is way up too. Ben, show that first slide for me. This is a look at the perpetuation landscape in 1993, or call it 95. If you had called and somebody at Reagan and said, hey, thinking about selling my business, who could we talk to? It would have been a very short conversation because there were really 5 players in the national marketplace. You had Accordia, USI, Poe and Brown, later Brown and Brown, HRH, and then Gallagher. And then, of course, 3 of those entities don't even exist in the same form today, but it was a very short list. And so as a result, there was not a tremendous amount of third-party M&A activity, and probably 90% of firms at that time were perpetuating internally. Now, step forward 30 years, Ben, next slide, and look at the landscape. Some of you are listening to this rather than watching, but you got 50 logos on here of buyers in the industry. And so we've gone from 5 and done about a 10x increase in the number of folks that are competing for deals. And it's just basic supply and demand with so many more buyers constantly barraging agents and brokers in the industry with high multiples and great opportunities with a third party. Supply and demand is driving a lot of the valuation increase. Just these guys are competing like mad to get deals done.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Very, very interesting to see how much the marketplace has changed. Maybe we'll take a minute. We're not going to go 32 more years into the future with predictions in that way, but certainly we could take maybe 5 to 7 years out. Think about 2030. So much of our work right now is around 2030 with firms, what the next 4 or 5 years look like. How do we think about these same topics? How do you expect some of these numbers to evolve over the next 5 to 7 years?
Webb, I think the biggest story, and this is in real time, is the advent and rapid acceleration of AI and its impact on our lives in a whole variety of ways, and ultimately how it's going to impact our industry. And I've been thinking about, like, what kind of metrics are we going to have in agents and brokers 5 years from today if we've got 5 years of the kind of acceleration of AI that's being discussed. Tesla right now is developing these humanoid robots, and they're in the 3rd version of this. And the projections are in the early 2030s that they're going to be selling 1 million of these units a year. And these robots are going to be very human-like. They're going to cost at scale something like $20,000. And these are going to be a very useful tool or companion for human beings. Now, I don't really see a bunch of producers that are humanoid robots out there. So I don't think the robots are going to directly affect our industry in the same way they might affect manufacturing or home health care or a variety of other areas. But you think about how AI is going to impact producer productivity. That's the thing I've been thinking a lot about and wanting to focus on here. And I looked back over the last 10 years in the best practices study. If you follow a producer through the revenue categories that they would have grown over the last 10 years, um, P&C producers and benefits producers have grown their books by 6 to 8% a year on average. That means over the last 10 years, they've roughly doubled the size of their books. And so books of business on average in the best practices study were $500,000 a decade ago, and today they're about $1 million. The average producer generates about $1 million in revenue, depending on the size of the agency. Larger ones, of course, have larger books. Okay, so over the last 10 years, we've seen a doubling of revenue. What are we going to see over the next 5 years? Half that time. I think we're going to see something close to the doubling of revenue again, which is an accelerated growth rate, of course. And it's like, well, why would you say that? And I think what's going to happen is that everybody's heard the quote now, AI isn't going to take your job. A person using AI is going to take your job. And I think what we're going to have is this bifurcation of our industry where you've got particularly young, aggressive, tech-enabled producers really leaning into AI and really quarterbacking a much broader ability to produce business, to marshal resources, to rely on larger teams. And I think you're going to see tech-enabled producers double their books over the next 5 years as a result of that. Now, generally speaking, we'll see producers just benefit from a variety of kind of technologies and AI. But I think there's going to be a group of what I'll call super producers who are going to be producing books of $4 and $5 million in revenue, and building incredible teams around them, and doing so in ways that we haven't seen traditionally. And I think that's going to be a real exciting development. It's going to mean that for folks that are not leaning into technology, they're going to feel like they're having to run faster and faster and faster to keep up with what's going on. And I think that's going to be a real challenge.
Yeah, it certainly AI will bring a lot of challenges to our industry and every other industry out there. But if you think about our history, it's hard to bring doom and gloom with that, with the advent of AI, because we've come through so many other major challenges and performed pretty well. And so, Tom, to you, obviously this is a pretty resilient industry. We think it's the greatest industry in the world. But how do you kind of reflect on that over the last 30, 35 years? Do you think about other challenges we faced?
Yeah. Can I ask Kevin a question before we move on? Because I think he said something interesting, or didn't say something interesting. His focus was.
You go again. Tom's coming after me today. You go.
That was not even a shot. You did not mention gains in productivity at the service level. And I think when you read the rags and listen to the pundits, they are increasingly or almost exclusively talking about productivity gains in terms of servicing over to AI. Kevin, interestingly, did not mention that, but mentioned rather tech-enabled producers. I don't know whether that kind of tips Kevin's hat as to his bias for growth as a kind of a cool thing to talk about, but I'll ask you, Kevin, directly. If we look 5 to 7 years out and we look at the gains in the industry that have come from AI, do you think they're focused more heavily in the production and the selling side, or do you see them more on the servicing and support side?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I think it's easier to get your mind around the exact numbers with producers. We've tracked that very carefully over the years. The tracking of, I actually went back and looked at this, and looked at kind of a long horizon growth rate in productivity per CSR. And the numbers weren't quite as dramatic as what we've seen historically from producers. And it's harder to define a CSR because a producer role is a pretty tightly defined role. It's kind of the tip of the spear in terms of driving new business. A CSR can mean a lot of different things in a lot of agencies. So we've had a hard time benchmarking this historically. But no, I think I'd say certainly. I don't know that there's any reason to believe that you wouldn't see as dramatic productivity gains on the service side as you would on the production side. But I think as you look at super performing producers, I do think that we're going to have some that really run away from the field. The reality that we've seen historically, every time we've seen a disruption in the market, whether it was the Great Recession or changes to healthcare, name the disruption over the last 30 years. Very few disruptions kind of reverse an existing trend. Usually what disruptions do is they accelerate a trend and typically favor a handful of really adaptable high performers. And you see a separation even faster of kind of the emerging haves and have-nots. And I think that will be just as true on the production side as it will be on the service side. But I think it'll just be more visible when we see producers running around, because we see all the data. We see producers running around with $4 and $5 million books. And I just think we're going to see that more commonly in the future.
Okay, no, good answer. And for what it's worth, I feel like we owe it to our listeners. Kevin loves to prognosticate and talk about the future and what's going to happen. He has an interesting track record at Reagan, having done that. You may remember, Webb, you may have been in middle school, but the Y2K scare in the year 2000, when a computer glitch was going to, the fear was as soon as the clock turned 2000 that it was going to be Armageddon. And having lived through that, I can tell you, for the 2 years leading up to that, man, it was all anybody was talking about. It was a real scare. So as we often do at Reagan, when something's coming up, we take bets on what the pain is going to be. And the question was this: how many people worldwide will die as a result of the Y2K, turn? Kevin's answer was 250,000 people were going to lose their lives as a result of Y2K. My guess was 0, because I live on planet Earth, and I kind of have a better sense as to reality. But Kevin, again, will often take a very, very out there position to try to get a laugh, or to, back in those days,
Been pretty dark.
I don't think it's that laugh worthy, Tom. I think it's probably the biggest cover up in U.S. history. And, you can joke all you want about it, but I think there were a lot of people that were really badly impacted by that, and it's been hidden from us.
JFK, Elvis, and Kevin's Y2K experience. There you go.
I
right
think
in
I
line.
actually understated the impact of Y2K if we objectively look at it.
Well, I think we would all certainly say that we expect consolidation to continue in multiple forms, both at the top end of the industry and others. Certainly, we have a lot of clients heavily focused and investing in talent recruiting, talent development. Kevin, I think that could play into your point of the type of producers that are hired over the next 5 years who have an ability to utilize the technology, leverage it for enhanced performance on sales. Certainly some things to keep an eye on. Do you have something there?
Well, one thing I'd say, I mean, you mentioned consolidation. It's always interesting to look at the number of agencies in America, and there's studies like the Future One study that come out, and we all feel like the number's just dropping off dramatically. And then we get another study comes out and it says, yeah, they're about the same number of independents out there as there were 5 years ago. I don't know about all those numbers. It's hard to put it all together because you can't see it all in front of you. But I would say this: there have been a lot of firms, a lot of new firms that have entered our space over the last 15, 20 years. And these are new firms that get created out of some of the M&A activity that occurs. You get people that leave following a transaction and they want to start up a new agency. We see that. We've also seen some direct writers or some captive agency forces flood into the better pastures of the independent agent model. So we've had a real nice replenishment of the system. Whether we'll see that continue or not, I don't know. But I want to go back to AI and one more thing that I think favors the rise of new agencies that will come into being. And one of the big questions about AI is whether it's a democratizing force like the PC that empowers the smaller firm, with all of kind of the same tools and resources that the big firms can get? Or is it somehow some scale play that's going to favor a handful that are going to dominate the world? And the more I read about it and study this, the more it seems like it is going to be like the PC, a democratizing influence. And I think that's another reason why smaller firms that are growth minded, that have a vision, that want to play the long game here, I think the future looks really bright. And I think we're going to have a very healthy agency system, even with all the changes that are clearly going to be coming by technology and all the other factors that'll come to our industry.
Okay,
It's
great.
interesting too to think back now to the beginning of the best practices study and the three most common questions you'd get in your consult, when you're just kind of meeting somebody for the first time or they call you, kind of the three most common questions that were asked 33 years ago were, first of all, where do we go to find good producer talent? All right. How do we put what's the silver bullet in terms of how to pay a producer to get the maximum kind of output from that producer? How do you pay them? And then finally, what do you do with a producer who's past his prime or her prime and he's sitting at his desk, kind of taking up space, reading the paper, drinking coffee, but not writing any new business? Hadn't written any new business since Happy Days was in first run. And it's interesting that 33 years later, I mean, there's AI and there's all the inevitable noise that pops up about cool stuff going on. InsurTech was kind of all the buzz 2 or 3 years ago. There's always something. And yet, at the core of many of our clients' strategic planning engagements and what they're really wanting to dig in on are how to answer those same three questions. So, lots changed, lots almost identical to where it was 33 years ago now.
Great. I'm going to move us into the 2-minute drill here. And I've got a prediction and a bit of a news alert to share with our listeners. Our very own Tom Doran here is going to be retiring in 2026. Tom, we all have a lot of emotion about that, but obviously appreciate everything you've done for our firm and our industry. I don't know if you have a slide you'd like to share, if you're going to be sentimental, or if you just want to keep beating up on Kevin, would be fine with me and all of our listeners. But wanted to let everyone know, if you have any final thoughts, Tom, you'd like to share,
Yeah,
certainly we welcome them here in
no
the
more
Red Zone.
slides. I'm past the point in my career for slides, right? So, no, I mean,
By the way, I thought that retired in place like thing that you just did seemed like a very kind of personal statement that you were making. I didn't know where you were going with that. Thought maybe.
Oh, he's gone.
Go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
oh yeah, let me wipe the tears away, Kevin. That was beautiful. But no, I mean, it's been 33 amazing years. I've been so grateful and so blessed to be here. But I'm very excited about the next chapter and don't know exactly what it'll look like. And it's not imminent. So Webb, no, you may not have my office, but sometime in 2026, going to hang up the Spurs. And it's been amazing journey. A lot of highs, a lot of lows. Thankfully, a lot more highs than lows. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
I'm certainly grateful for your guidance and support over the years, and have obviously enjoyed working with you. I won't speak for Kevin. I'm not sure in this moment if he's enjoyed the 30 years together or not, but I'll let him speak for himself.
Well, I thought maybe Tom, as a tribute, I could just tell a quick little Tom story. You thought the omelet thing was, so awesome. I just want
So as I'm leaving the company, though, you're going to honor me. You're not going to mock me, correct?
to, well, that's to be determined. But I just wanted to tell a quick story because this was such a precious moment, I think, for all of us, and it was a real learning experience, I think, for all of us. That Tom, one thing that he's done is there's been kind of a leadership role that he's played in helping us think about experiences that we want to make sure that we avoid. And one of those was a few years ago. We were about to have a best practices symposium where 200 or 300 people gather and we do a series of kind of seminars on topics. And so we hired an outside consultant to come in and just kind of help us sharpen our skills on some of our speaking and techniques and so on. And so this guy comes in and he was really big on the idea of a visual aid. He said, you've got to have a visual aid. It can really enhance the point that you want to make. So use a prop of some kind. And so we're all sitting there thinking, well, how do we do that? And the kind of stuff that we talk about. Well, Tom was going to give a talk on developing producers. And the idea in the talk was that when you hire a new producer, it is an incredibly costly commitment of time and money that you're going to make. And if you then don't develop that producer, you're basically throwing that money away. And so Tom, in his creative way, decided that the best way to do that was with a prop. And so we're all sitting there, and there's 200 people sitting in the room, and it's time for Tom's talk. And here he comes. He comes from kind of backstage. He walks out and he's holding a duffel bag. And there's a table on stage, and he walks up and he silently starts pulling banded $100 bills out of this stuffed duffel bag. Now they're counterfeit, okay, but they did look real. And he pulls these out, and he's quietly kind of making weird eye contact with people while he's pulling it out. He empties the entire duffel bag, and he stands there and he goes, $250,000. And then suddenly, violently, he takes all the money and throws it off the table. I mean, it's hitting people in the front row. I'm telling you, the entire room was stunned and horrified. They're like, who is this psycho? And then, without any transition, he just launches into his little talk about not wasting $250,000. And I got to tell you, the talk goes on for 30 minutes. It may be the most awkward thing I have ever seen in my, because everybody was so rattled. It was so over the top emotional. Everybody was so rattled. They never heard a word he said. About 20 minutes into it, we're all looking up there feeling sorry for him. It was like he was stark naked on stage. He gets done, kind of walks off the stage, tail between the legs. It goes down in history as maybe the overuse of a great idea. So thank you, Tom. That was a great moment.
Thank you, Kevin. I was suffering mightily up there, Webb, but the thing that really carried me through was looking in the back at my partners who like to sit in the back of the room, kind of like, the troublemaking 13-year-old in class. And they were just laughing hysterically at me. So it was a great day. And so there have been a lot of great days, a lot of tough days, but I will tell you, and again, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, but I just think back over the last 33 years, what an amazing ride it has been. And a lot of just amazing clients. I think that's the thing that I think about the most is the clients and the leaders that we've been able to work with. Many of our clients for decades that we've been able to consult with them and do valuation work and help them. I think that's the thing. That's the cool thing about our industry is it's such a relational industry that we work in, just filled with some of the nicest people that will do whatever they can to help you. And so we'll definitely miss those clients, but also my partners, including Kevin. And now you, Webb, we're great to have you on board. But, as I said, I've known Bobby Reagan for 40 years. I've known Kevin for 30. I met Kevin Stipe when he was 23 years old, Webb, a single man. It was not a pretty sight, but a lot of years and all of my partners, the shared commitment to our clients, doing excellent work, the shared faith that we have, the commitment to doing what's right with our families. I could not have picked a better industry and a better firm to spend a career in. And so I'm very grateful to God for everything that he has blessed me with and my family and my partners. And these guys and gals are like brothers and sisters to me. And that it just has been an amazing and satisfying ride.
Well, thanks, Tom, and thanks for taking the time to share with us here in the Red Zone. And just to reassure you, I guarantee there was one industry leader that was in the room that day with the duffel bag and the money who remembered that lesson and has his or her firm has benefited from that. So look, guys, really appreciate it.
Webb, I want to say one more thing because we joke around a lot. I also want to add this. Tom is among the very funniest people I have ever known in my life. And that's a cool quality. But he also has the ability to turn that off. And he is one of the most thoughtful, honest, transparent, and loyal people that I've ever known. And when you combine the sense of humor with those attributes, he's one of the greatest friends you could ever have. And we've had a blast working alongside each other all these years, and you will be sorely missed, Tom.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, guys. Thanks again. For those of you listening, appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you again soon.